tell us your name? Did you live here? Did you die here? Do you want to take a trip? Hi, guys. We are live and in person at Strange Journeys. I am Tom, your ghost host, and welcome to our next edition of Strange Journeys. It's a weird one today, and it looks like I'm probably going to be by myself. We might have a few folks jumping in here later that I've sent the invite to. Some of our ETs may be able to make it. We've had some sick and some are working. So, it's probably just going to be me for a little while anyway, maybe the whole show, who knows? But that's what I'm here for. But please remember, as you're watching, we provide these shows first and foremost for you, the watchers, for your entertainment. We are not by any means and do not claim to be scholars or experts in any of the topics that we choose to cover. We're simply enthusiasts and storytellers who have fun with these topics while doing our best to respect individual beliefs. And please remember that this is live and nothing is rehearsed or edited out later. And what you see is what you get. The only exception to that is our revisited shows where we rebroadcast previous live streams. The last one was the second part of our Stickman, Beware the Stickman show from last year, where we shared some creepy tales of people seeing the Stickman and the legend and lore of the Indian Stickmen and some of the creepy stuff around that. And now, next week, I haven't looked at the schedule for what our revisited is, but I'll have one edited up this weekend and be ready for broadcast next Saturday for our revisited show. But the next live stream is going to be picking up our Strange States series, where we talk about different states that the ETs are from and the oddities and weirdness in those states. And the next one on the schedule is Georgia. So Lewis Powell, that was with Southern Spirit Guide blog, and one of our ETs. So pay attention because the schedule is for Georgia. And we expect to hear a lot from Lewis on that one because that's his home. He ought to know more about that than anybody. He's actually written about it several times, and in his blog, I'm sure there's plenty of stories there. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, we do ask that you like the video, subscribe, and sign up for notifications.
Click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
Please do. We're up to 47 or 48 subscribers, and I think that's awesome on YouTube. I mean, like I said last time we were on, I want this to grow organically. I mean, I could pay a service and they're out there where they'll grow your subscriber list and all that kind of stuff. But I want this to grow organically just because people like what we do, not because I've paid them to subscribe. Do you know what I mean? That's where I'm at. So, and if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on our page, you don't have to do anything if you want to comment. But if you're watching in our group, StreamYard asks that you go to their page and give them permission to use your name in any comment. So if you're watching in Strange Friends, remember to click the link up above where this is posted and go to the StreamYard page, and all it does is say, yeah, you can use my name in the comments. So that way, if you comment, I'll know who it is. If not, it just tells me Facebook user. I don't have any way to know. And we, like I said, we do this for you, the watchers. Yeah, where is that? Yep. You, the watchers. And we appreciate you watching. We got some watching right now. Thank you. If you want to comment and let me know where you're watching from, I'd certainly appreciate it. Yeah, that reminded me. I saw started a YouTube video this morning, and it was the Book of Enoch. Somebody was just reading the Book of Enoch, and I told Lynn, I said, that'd put me to sleep. I mean, I would enjoy it, but it was just one guy reading. There wasn't anything going on. So, but if you appreciate what we're doing and you can help out, I'd certainly appreciate it. That's one way you can support the show. Become a patron on Patreon, and there's different levels: strange buddies, strange friends, strange. I don't remember now. But it's patreon.com/strange journeys. Another way you can help support the show is you see the little link scrolling across the screen right there, strangestuff.live, and you can get all your Strange Journeys stuff. You can get a Watchers t-shirt. You can get an SJ pillow. You can get a Strange Journeys coffee mug, a bag. Oh, see, there's Beware the Stick Man, the show that we just did the revisits on. You can get t-shirts, all kind of stuff there. Now, so that's one way you can support the show, and we'd certainly appreciate it. Go there, strangestuff.live. And we've got all kind of branded material for Strange Stuff, even phone cases. Okay, so you can get all kind of stuff there. Now, today's show. Oh God, I hope that didn't come through. I just got a Facebook notification just loud in my ears, so hopefully that didn't come through. But today's show is a strange one we've been talking about doing for a while. I've heard other podcasts on it, but we're talking about near-death experiences today. I lay on the gurney in pain, in severe pain like I'd never known before. To be truthful, though, I didn't really care at the moment, as the meds they had given me were doing the job. I hurt, but didn't give a damn. As I lay there waiting to be taken back into the treatment room for a heart cath to stop this heart attack that was taking place right then, an old man approached me. He wasn't wearing anything to distinguish him from any other person in the ER, so it made me curious as that he was making a beeline right to my gurney. He stepped over to me, cleared his throat, and introduced himself as a volunteer hospital chaplain. And I thought, well, maybe that explains why he's, not wearing scrubs, not dressed any particular way. And He asked me, he said, "Are you scared, son?" And it took me aback. I was like, scared. I hadn't even thought about it. I was in severe pain, but I hadn't even thought about being afraid. So I had to give it some serious thought before I answered. And I said, "No, sir, I'm not." And he kind of like, "Oh, okay," and mumbled a few more homilies before he walked away. To be truthful, I really didn't pay attention to what he said because I was already remembering the last time that I should have been afraid and wasn't. It was dark, pitch black, except for the salt water of Great Cruise Bay, which had a soft phosphorus glow. I could tell because I was in the water. My hands were covered in deep cuts and bleeding profusely. I couldn't breathe, and I was at the point of complete and utter exhaustion. I had no strength left to even tread water, and I was going down. It was a curious feeling, whatever this was. I distinctly remember losing strength in my arms and sinking below the water and drifting down. I could see just enough in the water, in the dark water, to make out little air bubbles floating up around me as I went down. While I do remember that experience, there was nothing else before everything went completely black. Now, I just read you an excerpt from a story I've written called Long Dark Night in the Middle of the Bay. It's a true story about uh, my experience in the Virgin Islands back in the 90s, where I had probably a near death experience. And I shared this during our Angels Among Us show, Christmas before last. But I left out a few details that I'm going to share later on in the show. Now, while my experience wasn't your classic near death experience, I've always been unique in that way where I may experience similar things to other, but mine have always had that little strange slant, skewed a little bit. However, our strange journeys today is focusing on that very thing, near death experiences. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of the philosophical or religious implications of what it means to have a near death experience. We're primarily going to be focusing on stories. And Tim, who's our normal regular co host, who's not able to make it today, he's recorded a video that I'll be sharing later. Dagny, one of our ETs, has written hers down. I'll be sharing that with you. And some other stories that I've just gleaned in research. Now, I will kind of give a little definition at the beginning and things that happen, some common elements, but we're not really going to focus on what is a near-death experience and what does it mean to you. I just want to share some cool stories. Okay. And that's really the focus of today's show. Now, Wikipedia defines a near-death experience, or an NDE, you may have heard it called that, as a profound personal experience associated with death or impending death, which researchers claim share similar characteristics. When positive, such experiences may encompass a variety of sensation, including detachment from the body, feelings of levitation, total serenity, security, warmth, the experience of absolute dissolution, and the presence of a light. When negative, such experiences may include sensations of anguish and distress. Explanations for NDEs vary from scientific to religious. Everybody's got a thought. Neuroscience research hypothesizes that an NDE is a subjective phenomenon resulting from disturbed bodily multisensory integration that occurs during life threatening events. While some transcendental and religious beliefs about an afterlife includes descriptions similar to NDEs. So one thing I was talking to Lynn about this morning, it seems like whatever culture you were raised in, that's what you remember, especially in a religious sense, whatever religion or faith belief system you were raised in. That's how you relate to this experience. Now, researchers have identified the common elements that define near-death experiences. I did like this. Many common elements have been reported, although the person's interpretation of those events often corresponds with what I was saying with the cultural, philosophical, or religious beliefs of the person experiencing it. For example, in the U.S., where 46% of the population believe in guardian angels, they will be identified. They will often be identified as angels or deceased loved ones that they see, while Hindus will often identify them as messengers of God in death. So it's basically the experiencer's point of view, I guess you could put it, their perspective. But some of the common traits are a sense awareness of being dead. You realize you're dead. Excuse me. A sense of peace, well-being, and painlessness. That's a lot of y'all know if you've watched this before. I watch a lot of videos on YouTube concerning our topics every week, so that basically I get all this in my brain, and that's one thing that all of them have said. They realized they were dead, but they were at peace. They didn't care. There was well-being and painlessness, positive emotions, a sense of removal from the world. But they also experience an out-of-body experience, OBE, as it's being termed popularly. Perception of one's body from an outside position, sometimes observing medical professionals performing resuscitation efforts. One I watched this morning, a guy had broken his thumb or something, and as they were operating on him, he floated out of his body and was watching them, and the nurse did something on his arm where they were trying to restrict the flow of blood, and it caused him to die, basically. And he said that he was sitting there watching them, and somebody says, "Oh my God, you've killed him." And he said, "I was just sitting there impressed with the doctor that he was going on about taking care of his patient, and then he left and began to experience all this stuff. When he came back, his doc had brought him back and finished the surgery and took care of him." Another thing they experience is a tunnel experience, or entering a darkness, a sense of moving up or through a passage or staircase, a rapid movement toward and or sudden immersion in a powerful light or a being of light, which communicates telepathically with the person. And that was another thing I heard, that on several of the ones I watched, they were talking to somebody, but they said they didn't open their mouth verbally. It was all telepathic. Receiving a life review, that old saying, saw my life flash before my eyes. Approaching a border or a decision by oneself or others to return to one's body, often accompanied by a reluctance to return. That's what was amazing to me in all of these I watched, was they they knew they needed to come back. They wanted to be with their loved ones, their family, but they didn't want to. They were like they loved where they were at so much that they just wanted to stay. And then suddenly finding oneself back inside one's body, and a connection to the cultural beliefs held by the individual, which seem to dictate some of the phenomena experienced in the NDE, and particularly the later interpretation. In other words, going back to what we were saying before, our cultural, our religious beliefs dictate to some degree what we see, how we see it, and how we interpret it. Psychologist Kenneth Ring has subdivided the NDE into 5 stages, he calls them. There's peace, there's body separation, there's entering darkness, there's seeing the light, and then entering another realm of existence. And though each individual NDE is specific to that person, there are these similarities. Now, some of the stories. Excuse me. Usually when I got somebody on here with me, I let them talk. I can take a drink. But I don't have that today. But we may have, I just got a message that Andrea may join us here in a little bit. But we're going to go on because I started this because I wanted to do it. And the ETs just helped me because I enjoy doing this. Hey, if you are watching, comment, let me know that you are and what your thoughts are about this. And if you've had an NDE, that would be cool. I thought I had somebody lined up to come on to share their story, but something must have come up. But like I said, I'll be getting back to my story later on, though I don't know if it actually fits. There are, to me, it was an NDE. A lot of the videos that I watched, well, I didn't even waste my time watching those, like near-death experience caught on tape, where somebody had a car wreck or an accident and they just they had a brush with death. To me, that doesn't fit an NDE. If if you're in Indiana Jones and he's crawling through there and that big pendulum with the blade on it swings down and it barely misses him, and instead of cutting him in half and he lives, to me that's not an NDE. That's a brush with death. And I'm sure you've had those where you were in a car accident, you could have died. Lynn's accident back the 1st of December, she was extremely blessed and lucky to not have died. It scared the you-know-what out of me when I'm sitting there and they've got her on the gurney putting her into the ambulance, because we realized how close she had come. But to me, that's not a near-death experience. Like I said, you could call that a brush with death. But Adam Tapp was 35 years old when he died. He was a paramedic in London for 15 years and doing some woodworking on his shop in 2018 when he says he got a little cavalier with his wood etching device, and the device arced in his hand and electrocuted him. His heart stopped for 11 and a half minutes. It was like someone flipped a switch. All my senses were overwhelmed by 12,000 volts of DC electricity. It was one of the most excruciatingly painful things I've ever experienced. I remember forcing thoughts like, I think I'm being electrocuted. Luckily, he had a friend with him who had recently taken a high voltage safety course. His friend Mark disconnected Tapp and called for Tapp's wife, Stephanie, who's a cardiac RN, and they immediately started CPR and they called 911. The ambulance showed up and two of his fellow paramedics, they gave him some epinephrine and defibrillated him twice before bringing him back to the land of the living. And he didn't wake up for 6 hours. And when he did, he was in the ICU intubated, which he says is a strange way to wake up. After being dead for more than 11 minutes, Tapp was resuscitated and fell into a coma for 6 hours. But while he was essentially dead to the world, he said he had a profound experience. Greg said, so far, good show. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. I'm doing my best, buddy. He said, Adam, he woke up in a place that seemingly he had always been. It was black and kind of seemed like space. He said he felt a frequency wash over him and saw what looked like gasoline on water, that film, with all these geometric shapes and patterns, adding that something was communicating with him through thoughts and feelings and emotions. He said, I just started fading into the fabric of the universe. It was so warm and peaceful and pleasant. He eventually woke up from the coma and asked how long he had been out and said if he had been told that it was 30 years, he would have believed it. He just felt like he'd been away. His sense of time was a bit confused, but what was more surprising is that he didn't feel quite at home in his body. It actually took me a while to feel comfortable in my body again, just breathing. I was so hyper aware of having to take a breath. It took me a couple of months. I just felt so foreign in my body. And Danny and Brinkley, a man named Danny and Brinkley, says, I saw my entire life pass performing like in a 360-degree panorama. I missed nothing. He said he noticed how many hairs were in the nose of the doctor who pulled you from his mother. You know everything there is from the time you open your eyes. You have complete cognitive awareness, no doubt about it. And that's all happening at the same time. Then you watch the same life from a second person point of view as if you were your own best friend. So you can see how silly, how funny, how dumb, how stupid it was. But it's one of your best friend, there's no judgment, just looking. And then you literally become every person that you ever encounter. And you feel the direct results of your interaction between you and that person. So no one gets away with anything, with anyone at all. And that was one of the videos that I watched. The guy said he felt that connection. He saw it had been a bad accident, and he was walking around the hospital, and every person he saw, he felt that connection. Is like he knew everything and every detail about their lives. That was kind of wild. Now, our E.T. Dagny having some health issues, so she wasn't able to be here. But she wanted me to share this story. She said, I was driving my car after work. I worked overnight shifts for many years at this point, and this was just after sunrise. I felt the overwhelming urge to sleep, though I knew I had to get home and park the car first. My brain said no. It shut off. I looked at the oncoming driver in the intersection thinking, I am so sorry I'm going to hit you, but I have to die now. I relaxed and allowed everything to slip from my control. There was no fear, but I was aware enough to know that I was about to impact another car almost head on. Then I was up against my airbag, deflated under my face. I was wondering why I was alive. A man was on his cell phone leaning into the driver's side window. He was talking to 911. I could see my engine up against my knees through the dashboard. Then I was in an ambulance strapped to a backboard. Excuse me. Next to me on the bench seat was the driver of the vehicle I had looked at. She was yelling at me and swearing. I couldn't really move, but I did say, Can I get out here? I didn't like riding with her. My next moment was standing at the foot of a hospital bed, looking at myself strapped down with a neck brace, looking very pale and still. A nurse came running into the room, started shaking me, and she was calling my name over and over. She yelled out towards the hall, Get the crash cart. I was completely relaxed. I had been a paramedic for 9 years in downtown Chicago for many years, and I had seen this play out from a different perspective many times. Yet this time I was only an observer. I felt I knew what they should be doing. I guided them with my thoughts, even though I wasn't even a part of them. I heard the nurse call out for some epinephrine. Another nurse called out, Glucagon stat. I got confused, thought to myself, this is a trauma victim. Why do you need a medical treatment? Then I was simply a part of the everything, like an oil swirling on the surface of a bubble. That's what the other guy said. But he said it was like gasoline on water. To me, that's like that rainbow hue that you get when oil is on the water, or like she said, on the surface of a bubble. Isn't that wild? Two different people describing the same thing. She says all colors, all sounds, all of everything was a part of me. And she states, yet I had no job, just glide and feel complete, perfect, calm, accept everything that was exactly as it should be. I felt no stress, no anxiety, at peace. And then suddenly I was wide awake. I was looking at the room with the nurses from my own eyes again. Just rest for a bit, the nurse said as she let go of my wrist and stepped away. My mom came into the room and reality was back. Come to find out, I had coded, and when they were working on me, one of the nurses thought to check my blood sugar, maybe because I was in an altered state of consciousness. It turned out to be 12, and they were surprised that they were even able to revive me. Wow. Wow. That's crazy. Uh, that explains a lot about Dagny's just openness to accept people. I don't know if you've noticed that when she's been on the show before, but she's just so open and loving. It's amazing to hear that story. And I wish she had felt good enough to be on here to tell it herself. Uh, she's just got that quirky, unique, lovely personality that we all love and appreciate her being part of the ETs. A man named Don Piper wrote a little article called 90 Minutes in Heaven. Don believes that he died in a car accident and, in fact, has now written a book and travels the country telling about his experience. According to him, he was driving across a bridge when he hit another car head on. They estimate the speed of the accident to be about 120 miles per hour between the two vehicles. The next thing he remembers is being in a place where he could hear songs of praise and a bright light off in the distance, a light that he believes is God. He was met by members of his family and friends that had already passed away. He says that no time passed while he was there, nor did he ever make it to the gates of heaven. Instead, he heard a voice singing, "What a friend we have in Jesus." And he woke up lying flat on his back under a blue tarp, the car destroyed around him, and a man he had never met before sitting in the wreckage holding his hands. Doctors and members of the medical staff tell him that he was declared dead on the scene and had been dead for 90 minutes before he suddenly woke up. Today, he says that each day he yearns for the heaven he was in and feels like life moves too slowly. All he wants is to be back where God is again. See, that's another unique thing about these experiencers. They the fear of death is gone and they can't wait to get back to wherever it was they went. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't heaven. I'm not saying it was. Um, I mean, I was raised in church and we believe in an afterlife and we believe in heaven. Um, so that could be heaven to him, you know. Again, I wasn't going to get into the religious or philosophical side of the issue, but everybody has their own belief system, and I respect that. Um, but every religion does believe in a heaven. So this could be us connecting with the spiritual side of things. Now, like I said, Tim wasn't able to be with us, but he sent us a recording of him sharing his story, and I want to share that with you right now.
Hey, y'all. I thought I'd tell my story. I don't know for sure that what I had was a near-death experience or anything like that. It may have just been the drugs that I was on. 96, 97, I had to have hernia surgery. I'm deathly afraid, allergic to both local and general anesthetics. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances and the pain that I was in, they definitely had to do the surgery. And so they had to use a general anesthetic. I remember only a few things from this particular incident. One of those is that I remember, counting down. They tell me to count down from 100. I think I made it to 96, and that was about it. From there, I was out. The next time that I remember something was sort of waking up, and I could see a bright light, but it was blurry in the area that I was in. I could see people moving around. I definitely heard three voices, one of which said it was a female voice said that we were losing him. There was a male voice that was talking about that my heart rate was dropping, and a doctor saying that we need to do everything we could that we get it out. The next thing that I remember is that I remember sitting next to a pond that I grew up at as a kid. It was one that I went to all the time, an old mill pond in McNairy, Arizona. And as I was sitting there, I could see the cattails and the algae that grows on top of the pond. I could see, the old ruins of the sawmill that is now non-existent, and um, I remember the smells. The smell of the stagnant water from the pond. Um, and I remember looking next to me and there being a man sitting next to me. He had a fishing line out there, as I often did as a kid, and I recognized him almost immediately as my granddad. My granddad passed away when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and so I don't have a whole lot of memories of what he really looks like without seeing a picture. But I remember him sitting there. I remember that he used to love going fishing, and he looked at me and he said, "This isn't your place. You don't belong here." It wasn't the first time that I had heard that. I'd heard that also as a child when I wandered into his wood shop one time. "This isn't your place. You don't belong here." Um, the next thing I remember is waking up inside the recovery room, sitting sort of upright in a chair that's leaned a little bit backwards. The doctor coming over and telling me that they had been very scared of what had happened, that they had a hard time pulling me out of the anesthesia, which is pretty common with me. Like I said, I do have that allergies to that particular thing. Was it a near death experience? I don't know, but I do know that to this day, I remember that. You know, um, I remember that when I had been a child, my the pastor at the church that my grandfather was buried at talked about one day we're going to see Bill and he's going to be fishing next to the river of life, and I think that that's kind of what that was. That I was seeing him where he was, still fishing, still enjoying his life, but was it really a near death experience? I really can't tell you. You all have a great.
And Andrea has joined us.
Hey,
Hey.
kind of as fast as I could. I'm sorry.
Okay. Did you catch the tail end of Tim's story there?
Like just the
Yeah.
very end. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, he was in the hospital doing a procedure, and he has an allergic reaction to the anesthesia, and he was sitting by a creek fishing with his grandfather, and his
Wow.
grandfather says, "This ain't your place. Go back to where you belong."
Wow.
And that's some of the things that that I've noticed in this near death experience is the people that come back, they usually get told that,
Yeah.
you're not through down there, you've got to go back. So do you have any near death experience stories?
I should have had enough foolhardy experiences that I should have had one. But but um no, the closest thing that I have is I was so I have when I was born, I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck 3 times and my left
Wow.
hand tucked in between.
Mm,
And they said if my hand wasn't there to pull that off, I would have been a blue baby. I had heart surgery
wow.
at 18 months old for a staph infection. I've had lots of these real close to dying
Yeah.
situations since the very beginning. And when I was 9, the only thing I can say that I guess would none that I can remember like passing, like actual passing, but it was in the middle of winter and I was in the back of my dad's truck helping hang Christmas lights, and I flipped out of the back of the truck. I just remember my feet sliding
Wow.
out from underneath me. It was dark out, and I remember hearing, catch yourself in a female's voice, and I thought, I can't, it was happening just like this, and I got you. I'll do it. It's okay.
Wow.
That fast. And my dad said he watched my body slowly go down, and the back of my head hit like the tire in the back of the truck. If I had fallen at full speed, I would have been dead. So that's the only
Yeah.
thing. Like, I don't have any, like, there was a pasture or anything like that.
Well, that's one thing I
Thankfully.
was saying earlier, that I was going through YouTube watching all these videos, and there was like tons of these videos saying near death experience caught on camera. Well, no, you can't catch that on camera. What I think they were catching was brushes with death,
Right.
and just calling it a near death experience,
Right.
because the near death experience, you see your loved ones, or you see God, or like they said in the Hindus, the messengers of the god of death. You see these people, you communicate telepathically, you see the light, the tunnel, all these different things. But for somebody, just the car flying by them and it doesn't knock them out of existence, that's that, to me, that's not a near death experience.
No, that's a brush with death. And that's what I mean. I've had plenty
Yeah.
of those all of my life where I'm like, well,
Oh yeah.
God must not be done with me yet because I should have been dead.
Right. Well, I wanted to get to a couple of things, like on the flips, are different types of these experiences, because all I've talked about to this point, Andrew, was like the positive things, the positive, Dagny's story and Tim's story and a couple of other stories I shared. But I want to get to the negatives in a minute. But I came across one that I thought was totally unique. It was called a shared death experience. This is wild. It says William Peters was working as a volunteer in a hospice when he had a strange encounter with a dying man that changed his life. The man's name was Ron, and he was a former merchant marine who was afflicted with stomach cancer. Peter said he would spend up to 3 hours a day at Ron's bedside talking to and reading adventure stories because few of his family and friends would visit. When Peter stopped by Ron's beside around lunch one day, the frail man was semi-conscious. Peter read passages from Jack London's Call of the Wild as the frail man struggled to hang on. What happened next, he says, was inexplicable. Peter says he felt a force jerk his spirit upward out of his body. He floated above Ron's bedside, looking down at the dying man. Then he glanced next to him to discover Ron floating along beside him, looking at the same scene below. He looked at me and gave me this happy, contented look as if he was telling me, check this out. Here we are. Peters says he then felt his spirit drop into his body again. The experience was over in a flash. Ron died soon afterwards, but Peters' questions about that day lingered. He didn't know what to call it at that moment, but he eventually learned that it wasn't unique. Supposedly others have had this shared death experience.
That would be interesting to interview some hospice nurses and see
Oh
if,
my,
like,
wouldn't it?
like, because they always have these stories, they
Yeah.
have those stories. I follow a few on TikTok because
Yeah.
and they're usually really peaceful
Right.
experiences, and it doesn't sound like this guy was afraid at all. Like, if you think about it, it would be something that thinking about it sounds really intimidating and scary, but seems like in the moment it was peace, just okay,
Mm-hmm.
it was
Yeah.
peaceful. And
Well, it's like,
that's
have
it's a
you
good
read
thing.
the Stephen King book, Dr. Sleep?
No, no, I
It's
haven't.
a sequel to The Shining.
Oh, okay.
To the book The Shining, not the movie.
Yes, let's
Anybody,
not talk about the movie.
yeah, anybody that's a Stephen King fan knows that you have to differentiate between The Shining the movie and The Shining the book.
Yes.
But anyway, the young boy in The Shining, Danny, is grown up in Dr. Sleep, and he has this unique ability to basically do what we just read, or I just shared, where he helps people leave their body, and he works in an old
Wow.
folks home, and that's his unique gift, is to help people pass over, but he has to keep it on the down low because be calling him Dr. Death instead of Dr. Sleep. So,
It's kind of like that cat that was in that one nursing home facility that
yeah,
nobody wanted in their room because every time we would go in there, that person was passing within the week. And they were like, get that
exactly.
cat out of my room.
Yeah, don't let the cat in my room. Not today. Excuse me. Okay, I wanted to, as we start winding down, from the Journal of the Missouri State Medical Association, they list a few negative or more near-death experiences on the negative side. And there's the inverse NDE. There was a man thrown from his horse, and he found himself floating over at treetop height, watching the emergency medical technicians working over his body. No, no, this isn't right, he screamed. Put me back. But they didn't hear him. Next, he was shooting through darkness toward a bright light, flashing past shadowy people who seemed to be deceased family members. He was panic stricken by the bizarre scenario and his inability to affect what was happening. A woman in childbirth felt her spirit separate from her body and fly into space at tremendous speed. Then saw a small ball of light rushing toward her. It became bigger and bigger as it came toward me. I realized that we were on a collision course, and it terrified me. I saw the blinding white light come right at me and engulf me. A woman collapsed from hypothermia and began re-experiencing her entire life. I was filled with such sadness and experienced a great deal of depression. So, not all NDEs are on the positive side, and that's not even the worst.
Well, I know 3 people who have clinically died a few times and
Yeah,
have been brought back, and all 3 did not. I asked, well, did you see? What'd you see? And all
yeah,
3, they were like, no, it was darkness. And I will tell you that was a life-changing moment for them, actually.
yeah,
It scared them that they were their heart had stopped, clinically
yeah.
dead, and that there was no experience. And it was life-altering for them. I mean, not only the fact
Wow.
that they did almost die, but the fact that there was nothing there. And they definitely went on their own kind of spiritual journey after that, and to find their solution for that.
Right. Well, that's one thing that I've noticed in all of this is the experiencers come back and everyone says it changed me.
Yeah.
You know, they're never the same again. That one was the inverse, basically just the opposite of that. But there's also the void NDE. A woman in childbirth found herself abruptly flying over the hospital and into a deep, empty space. A group of circular entities informed her that she never existed, that she had been allowed to imagine her life, but it was a joke. She was not real. She argued with facts about her life and descriptions of Earth. No, they said, none of that had ever been real. This is all there was. And she was left alone in space. Another woman in childbirth felt herself floating on water, but at a certain point, it was no longer a peaceful feeling. It had become pure hell. I had realized that this was eternity. This was what forever was going to be. I felt the aloneness, the emptiness of space, the vastness of the universe, except for me, a mere ball of light screaming. A woman who had attempted suicide felt herself sucked into a void. I was being drawn into this dark abyss or tunnel, a void. I was not aware of my body as I know it. I was terrified. I felt terror. I had expected nothingness. I had expected the big sleep. I had expected oblivion. And I found now that I was going to another plane, and it frightened me. I mean, just there, like I think the one like you just said, they went there and there was nothing,
Yeah.
you
It,
know?
it it really, bothered them that they experienced nothing. But, my background, one of the things I used to do in my many years of life that I've had so far is I used to be a childbirth assistant. I was a doula, and my job is or was to make sure that the mother and baby had the experience that did not leave any trauma behind, because that is actually really common in
Right.
L&D. And to imagine having a near death experience when you're supposed to be having this,
Oh, yeah.
really amazing life, another life
Right.
altering experience, and it to not be. So I'd had, I guess, a little experience like that with my second child. He was extremely large. I'm 5'2", kind of petite, and he was 10 and a half pounds.
Wow.
And I went 42 weeks with him. So I mean, I know I deserve some sort of trophy, I think. But I experienced a lot of blood loss with him. And I had no idea what was going on. I do remember thinking, like, at the time, how easy it was and how calm it was and how everybody was moving really slow.
Right.
But I guess my doctor was in full panic. I had started to hemorrhage. And I remember not hearing Christopher cry, and just remember thinking, how it was peaceful. And I have a vivid, and I've told my husband, memory of seeing myself down, like seeing down on myself. And they were calling in hematology. I
Yeah.
mean, they were looking to do blood and, transfusions. It was pretty intense for a while. But everything pulled through. Ironically, Chris's birthday, the day he was born, is the day that my grandfather, passed away, like
Wow.
about 16 years prior. So I thought that was really interesting, and the
Yeah.
first thing I said when they put him in my hands, I had no idea. I did not know, didn't put the dates together, is I looked at my mom and my dad and I was like, he has my grandpa's hands. And I remember the look on their face. They were like, you know,
Oh, wow.
but that's like the closest, as I do have that, as that blood loss, before the doctor was able to stop that. Like, I do have this. And I remember the only reason why like it came to me is I remember asking John, I'm like, were there like a mirror on the ceiling, or were there lights or something? Because I keep seeing, I have
Yeah.
this memory. And so I think it was but it was not scary. It was not, everything was slow. Everything was calm. Um, but it
Well,
wasn't,
whether you okay.
sorry.
Yeah, I heard that I hope it didn't come out over there. I had a Facebook notification come up and it just rang real loud in my ears. No. But you had an out of body experience
Yeah.
where you
So
may not have had, a near death experience. If you
sorry.
saw
That's the
that.
closest I got.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'll be finishing up my story here in a little bit, but
I want to hear it.
I don't know if it's completely a near death experience. But the last one I want to get to before we close out was the hellish NDE. A man in heart failure felt himself falling into the depths of the earth. At the bottom was a set of high rusty gates, which he perceived as the gates of hell. Panic stricken, he managed to scramble back up to daylight. He's like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
A woman was being escorted through a frighteningly desolate landscape and saw a group of wandering spirits. They looked lost and in pain, but her guide indicated that she was not allowed to help them. An atheistic university professor with an intestinal rupture experienced being maliciously pinched, then torn apart by malevolent beings. A woman who hemorrhaged from a ruptured fallopian tube reporting an NDE involving horrific beings with gray gelatinous appendages grabbing and clawing at me. The sounds of their guttural moaning and the indescribable stench still remain 41 years later.
You can't see this. I don't know if I've got goosebumps from hearing these. Like, that's terrifying. Oh my goodness.
It
Like,
is.
my hair's
A woman who attempted suicide felt her body sliding downward in a cold, dark, watery environment. When I reached the bottom, it resembled the entrance to a cave with what looked like webs hanging. I heard cries, wails, moans, and the gnashing of teeth. I saw these beings that resembled humans with the shape of a head and a body, but they were ugly and grotesque. They were frightening and sounded like they were tormented in agony. So, not all NDEs are positive. You know, a majority of them are, from what I've gone through, but most are not.
Well,
I mean,
listening
most are
to
good, some are not.
right. Well, listening to like the hospice nurses on like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and stuff that I follow, like most of their experiences when they see somebody passing, they say generally if it has like a supernatural experience, it's almost always incredibly like my husband's here,
Yeah,
or my
right.
mom, but they do have few, really awful ones.
Yeah.
And so I have personally been present for a really awful passing where she
Mm,
was literally screaming, "Get them off of me."
wow.
But there was she didn't she she passed. There was no
Yeah.
it was my first experience actually being around death.
Wow.
It was pretty awful. It was my great grandmother, and she fought. It was awful. it was
Mm.
it was one of the worst sounds and
Oh my
experiences.
goodness.
But that sounds like more of another story, like for
Yeah.
another time.
Right.
But the hospice nurses always make it sound like very rarely is it a poor experience, so I guess there's
Yeah.
um
Well, and again, it's all from our own personal point of view, which like we said before, it's personal experience, and like I've said all through this show so far, it's whatever your cultural, religious, spiritual background is, that's basically how you experience it. you
hmm,
know
makes you
most of
kind of
these, yeah,
wonder. Yeah.
well, it's like early on, let's see, in the notes, when we were talking, let's see, what did it say? um
I'm so sorry.
46% of the population in the US believes in guardian angels. So a person who experiences an NDE will see a guardian angel or their loved ones, Um, and it's almost like whoever is guiding this experience is guiding it through your perception and belief system. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
From what I'm picking up, I'm no expert by any means. We say that at the beginning of the show.
No, I'm just kidding. I said, yes, you are. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm totally
Yeah,
joking.
none of us are experts in any of the topics that we cover. We're
No.
enthusiasts, and
Yes. Hobbyist.
so right. So here we are. After that, I wanted to close out with the um, basically finish up my story that I had started, um, where I was in Grand Cruz Bay on St. John Island, and I was going down below the water, and all I remember is seeing the little bubbles floating up, and I was in severe pain and complete and utter total exhaustion. My hands were sliced to pieces from trying to climb up the back of the sailboat, and the ladder on the back of the sailboat, someone had cut it off, and it was the aluminum rings, and when they crimped it to cut it, it left nothing but like razor sharp edges on it and points. And so that's why my hands were cut and bleeding, because I was trying to hold on to those to pull myself up, and cutting my hands deeper and deeper every time I tried, until I finally just gave out, where I couldn't function anymore. I was too tired to even tread water, and I was sinking, and that's was the last thing I remembered until I opened my eyes and looked up into the night sky. And I was laying on a hard surface, but it was moving, a gentle rocking, and I realized that I was on the sailboat. I wasn't real. I mean, I felt sure it was my sailboat, the one I had been trying to get into, but I had no way of really knowing because it was dark. All I could see were the stars. But I was wet and cold, and I felt around until I found the door going down below decks and confused. I don't know how I made it out of the water. I have no recollection. The last thing I remembered was sinking down in the darkness of the bay. And then I was on deck. What happened?
It
And
wasn't your time.
well,
It
yeah,
was not your time.
I have no I mean, I have no memory from the time I was in the water till I was on the deck. I mean, I don't remember a light. I don't remember seeing people, but when I was going down, I, I mean, I just accepted there was a piece where I had accepted, this is it. I'm like, okay, there's nothing else I can do. I'm done. This is the way it ends. And then I opened my eyes on the deck of the boat. And the most unique thing that I don't share, and I haven't shared this before, but my hands were completely clean. No cuts, no bleeding, nothing.
I was wondering how, like, did you have cuts anywhere else? Like, that could have explained it.
Mm-mm.
Somebody was touched by an angel. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. You were saved,
well, well, that's why I shared it in our Angels Among Us show, and I just shared a real brief uh,
Yeah.
instance of it. I didn't really go into detail, but that's one thing I've written all this down, and I'm working, I guess, on a book, trying to get all this stuff down before I get too old to forget. and and I call it the Long Dark Night in the Middle of the Bay. And that's one thing I've never shared is about my hands. I mean,
That's
because
crazy.
I get up in the boat, and that's another thing about these near death experiences. Um, they some of them, were dying, obviously, of whatever. One lady said she had I don't know what was going on with her. I don't know if she was giving birth or what, but her abdomen was filling up with blood, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. And she has this near death experience, and when she comes back, her body starts flushing the blood out of her system. And she talked about how much blood I mean, this was after she was back. Her body was just flushing all this blood out of her system, and doctors and nurses were getting concerned, but her vitals were stable. you know so
Wow.
so something happened to her in that. So, well, Andrea, any closing thoughts, suppositions?
I'm glad I haven't had a near death experience with everything I've gone through. I'm really glad, and I think it's really fun and interesting to see how people treat you know their experiences and how it
Right.
sends them on a journey to look for answers, and how ultimately you
Exactly.
usually find people finding a piece that they didn't have before.
Right.
So it just kind of tells me that that's why they had one way or the other, why that experience was
Hmm.
supposed to be that way. And in the long run, when their time does come, you don't know what they really get.
Yeah.
But hopefully it is that in that final chapter, it's that piece that
Right.
they've been always looking for. So that's my opinion.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, what you were saying. They come back with a new outlook on life. And I mean, when I came out of mine, my first thought was home. I want to go home, you know. And I left I you'd have to read the story to get all the details as to what led to that, but maybe that's for another show. I don't know.
I'll be
But
there.
but my final thoughts, as I've researched this, I can't. I mean, my brain keeps going to the fact that most skeptics of the paranormal do not seem to have an issue with near death experiences. Isn't that crazy?
It's ridiculous.
I mean, they talk about ghosts and how they're not real, and UFOs and extraterrestrial beings and extra dimensions, and they don't. But when it comes to a near-death experience, I couldn't find any skeptical, saying, "Oh, that's not real."
It's in my experience and with what John and I do with the Grave Hunters Society, I'm telling you, everybody has a ghost story. Like, and
Oh
they'll go,
yeah,
oh, but they'll want to like, but it was nothing, but they want to tell it,
yeah,
So I think in the long run, I don't think that there is really a true non-believer. I think we all know,
right.
we all know it's innate in us that something
Well,
is out there.
I found some different opinions, but no real dubiousness about individual accounts. I believe that it could be because what have we been saying since this show started? So that's my final thoughts.
Love it.
That it's a personal experience, uh, and hundreds and thousands, probably millions of people have had these experiences, and you can't refute them. You know, you may believe a different way, but you can't refute them. So,
No.
Andrew, I'm glad you made it today, and we're going to close out the show now. Is there anyone here with us? Did you hear that? Can you tell us your name? All right. I haven't pulled the next revisited show for next Saturday yet, so we'll be announcing that on our Facebook pages. But in 2 weeks, what's on the schedule is Strange States, Georgia.
Ooh, that's a
So
good one.
we're looking forward to Lewis kind of headlining that show since he lives there and has already researched a bunch of it with his Southern Spirit Guide. So, well, guys, keep your strange journeys safe. We'll see you soon. Thank you, Andrea. Bye bye.
See ya.